Thanksgiving should be a time of getting together with family and loving them with everything you've got. Calling out the things you're thankful for together. Regretfully, this story is of a horrific Thanksgiving. On the night of November 28, 1985, several members of the Blount family had gathered at a family trailer on the Hilltop Mobile Home Park that lay in the suburbs of Fort Worth, Texas. Joe Blount, Angela Blount, Robert Blount, Michael Columbus, Susan Blount, and Carl Ray Blount were all present at the trailer. Robert was the son of Susan and Joe, Carl was the brother of Joe, and Michael was Carl's estranged son. The family sat down and ate dinner between 4 and 5 p.m. After dinner was finished, Ray went home. At 9 p.m. that night, Susan went for a lie down while Joe drove Angela, Robert, and Michael to a local convenience store for ice cream and beer. While the others went out, Susan later said she heard a knock at the door, but when she looked outside, she didn't see anyone and went back to sleep. When the others returned to the trailer about 20 minutes after they had left, they found a briefcase sitting at the door. The three teenagers were excited that the briefcase might contain valuables or money and brought it inside. Angela immediately set it down in the living room and opened it, and the bomb. Joe Blount, Angela, and Michael were all killed instantly by the blast. Joe was 44 when he died, while Angela was 15 and Michael was 18. Robert survived the blast despite being close by when the explosion occurred. He sustained superficial injuries and his slippers were melted to his feet by the heat. Susan Blount wasn't harmed in the incident. Police were quickly on the scene and spent several months combing through the blast-damaged trailer and questioning hundreds of people without finding anything conclusive. A theory began to become widely supported that the bomb had been left at the wrong trailer, which prevented identifying the indeed victim, and therefore the perpetrator. In June 1997, police were given new powers and funding to investigate domestic terrorism in the wake of the Oklahoma City bombing and the unsolved Blount family bombing, which was one case that was reopened. During this reinvestigation, a man named Charles Jack Ferris came forward to tell them that his cellmate had confessed to having carried out the bombing. His cellmate's name was Michael Roy Toney. Michael Roy Toney was born on December 29, 1965 in Cottonwood, California. His father abandoned the family early in Michael's life, and his mother worked in several local taverns to support the family. During his early life, Michael and his brothers were often beaten and abused by the men their mother brought home. Michael later said that to escape the worst of the abuse, he would hide in a shed at the back of their property for hours. When Michael was 9 or 10, he was strapped to a chair by one of his mother's boyfriends and had his hands burned badly. He eventually left school at the age of 15 and fled to Texas, where he lived in Hearst, Euless, Tarrant County. When he was living in Texas, he married a woman named only Mrs. Toney in court documents. Michael had several run-ins with the law during his life, primarily for burglary and theft. He was paroled several times, often violating parole shortly after. In 1997, he was arrested and held pending trial for another burglary he had committed in 1993. While there, Michael was held in a cell with Charles Jack Ferris. According to Ferris, they got to talking about the Blount bombing, and during the conversation, Michael told Ferris he was responsible. Ferris immediately told the authorities in exchange for his release. The investigation zeroed in on Michael Roy Toney. The police first spoke with Michael's ex-wife, who he had been married to at the time of the bombing. In her first interview, she denied that Michael would have had any involvement in the matter, but according to police, when the seriousness of the crime was explained to her, she changed her story. While the authorities were deciding whether or not to take Michael to trial, they learned that Ferris had changed his story. He had seen a news story about Michael being indicted for capital murder for the bombing, and he told the police that the two of them had come up with a story in their cell to get one of them out early on release. The trial began in May 1999 in Fort Worth, Texas. Robert and Susan, as the surviving witnesses, gave their testimony of what had happened that day. When it was the turn of Michael's ex-wife, she stated that Michael, a friend, and herself had traveled to a propane shop that was adjacent to the trailer park in the night of November 28, 1985. Michael then got out of the truck they were traveling in, carrying a briefcase, and came back with it a short while later. A former cellmate of Michael's was then called to testify against him. He alleged that Michael had told him he was paid $5,000 to deliver the bomb as part of a drug-related hit. According to his testimony, Michael had left the briefcase on the wrong doorstep. Michael was put on the stand and testified that he didn't know the trailer park existed until shortly before his 1997 arrest. He disputed his ex-wife and best friend's testimony that he had been driving a truck on the night November 28th, as he claimed he hadn't bought the truck until December 13th. Despite these claims, Michael Roy Tony was found guilty and sentenced to death. His being sentenced to death relied mostly on his cellmate's testimony that the crime had been a premeditated one related to organized crime. Not long after Michael was convicted and sentenced, discrepancies were discovered in the case. It was discovered that the cellmate who testified against Michael in the trial was a pedophile who was facing charges for indecency with a child, and his charges dropped in exchange for his testimony. He later publicly stated that his testimony was all lies. The best friend who was supposed to be with Michael and his ex-wife on November 28th was discovered to have changed his version of events at least 4 times, and his story had never matched the ex-wife's until the trial. He later failed a polygraph test, signed an affidavit in 2001 retracting his testimony, and publicly stated that the events he remembered may not have occurred on November 28, 1985. It was also proven that the truck Michael had supposedly been driving on November 28th indeed hadn't been purchased by him until December of 1985. In all, the Tarrant County District Attorney's Office was found to have withheld 14 pieces of evidence from the defense that would have exonerated Michael Roy Tony. The case was turned over to the Texas Attorney General, and the state of Texas dropped all charges on December 17, 2008. Michael Roy Tony was released on September 2, 2009. After spending more than 10 years on death row. However, he tragically died a month later on October 3rd. He had been driving a pickup truck near Rusk, Texas when he lost control and was thrown from the vehicle. He was killed instantly. When Michael Roy Tony was released in 2009, the case was once again unsolved. The Texas Attorney General stated that the case would be reviewed but did not elaborate on whether Michael would face retrial for the crime. Authorities later told Susan Blount that the case would be retried but that they needed time to build a new case against Michael. The type of bomb used and whether its design had ever been linked to any other bombings has never been made public. As time passed, many media outlets have questioned why more information about it hasn't been released in the hopes of stirring up new tips on the decades-old case. Since Michael's death and the case has become inactive, it is currently not believed to have been under investigation and remains officially unsolved. Police sources have told the media that this is still believed to be the most likely scenario, that the bomb was placed at the wrong trailer that night, which made identifying the perpetrator difficult. Michael had stated many times before his release that he had been in contact while on death row with people who knew who really carried out the bombing. He had said many times that he wanted to name these people once he was released. Since his death, no new information has come to light. What do you believe likely occurred in this case? Was Michael Roy Tony guilty, or has someone gotten away with a triple murder all these years?